Hey everyone, it's Lindsay with My Nerds Attack again with your second episode of Dreadfully Yours, with second episode of season 3 of Penny Dreadful. And again, we're going to go through analysis. It's going to be a little different than it was last episode because things are getting really kind of intensive already right off the bat with things this season. I'm going to separate things by geographic location, but we're also going to separate by characters as we go. Things were really intense, and real quick, right off the bat, I was totally right about Dr. Sweet, wasn't I? I kind of called who he might be. So that's pretty interesting, and I will go a little bit more into depth about him and what they might be doing with him when we get into Vanessa's story, which I will actually cover pretty intensively right off the bat. But I want to talk just briefly on Dorian and Lily, which is the first story we touched on. So let's get right into London. Okay, so we finally get to see Dorian and Lily for the first time this season. So a note about Dorian, I said that I would talk about Dorian and his book a little bit since we didn't talk about it last episode. So most of what has happened to Dorian in his book has already happened prior to what we have seen in the TV show. I'm not going to give away anything because I don't know if they're going to do a flashback or not. I suspect that they might actually, because how Dorian's portrait comes into being is actually pretty important to his character, and we actually haven't seen that happen. And I suspect that is something that we will probably see at some point in the show, and I have no doubt that that will occur. So I don't want to give away too much to you, you readers. You watchers, excuse me. But I will say that there's no real equivalent to what is happening between him and Lily right now. In the books, he's really just a hedonistic creature. I mean, he does kill people, there are things he does, and he does leave a trail of bodies in his wake. But nothing comparable to what he's doing here with Lily. He's really feeding off Lily, and they're feeding off each other, and there's nothing comparable to what's going on here. He also enjoys life, but he also has a conscience, and that's something that we haven't seen as much of in the TV show. There's a little bit here and there, but it's not to the extent that it starts to come out later on in the book, and things happen that cause things to change for him, and I don't want to go into it again with that because it might be spoilers, but it's a little bit different than what version we've been given here, and I'm going to be interested to see where they go with his character. So we see Lily and Dorian go into a kind of a snuff house where they are surrounded by men who are going to watch a young woman, a young prostitute, a young girl be killed. And instead of letting the young girl be killed, Dorian and Lily kill the men. It's amazing to watch. And interestingly enough, Dorian lets Lily kind of lead the charge. And Lily says that the girl is hers now. It's very interesting. It's curious what she exactly wants from the girl. And when we see them again, the girl is sleeping. She wakes up. She's dressed in very, very innocent clothing, almost childlike clothing. And she goes down and sees Dorian and Lily dancing. Lily is very kind to her, but the girl has a backbone. She's sassy and very unwilling to take any shit. I think it's great. I think it shows that she has a passion and a fire that Lily clearly wants. It'd be interesting to know if she had picked out this girl beforehand, or if it's just a coincidence, it's a matter of fate that this girl has such a passion and such a fire to get back at the men that have done exactly what the men did to Lily. And of course, they say that they're going to get back at the men who used them. That Lily, one of the things I really liked is that Lily asks the girl if she wants to forgive the monsters, and she says no. And so Lily says that they will have monumental revenge. I think it's a very interesting storyline they're going with this, that Lily basically wants to get revenge on men for having used her and kind of discarded her and treated her like crap. And it's a very interesting storyline, especially in this time period in London with the women's movement and things like that, that women were not treated very well. Women didn't have a lot of rights. Even if you were aristocratic, you weren't allowed to go to, there weren't a lot of opportunities for you to go to college unless you had a lot of money. And even then, there were only certain things that you were allowed to do. So it's very interesting that they're going this route with Lily and that they're going to have this child. And also it's very interesting to watch that Dorian takes a complete backseat to this. He's letting Lily run the show completely. It'll be interesting. One of my friends actually asked me if Dorian actually had any lines, and he had like one or two, but very few. So we didn't actually get to see a lot of Dorian, even though he was on screen. We didn't actually get to see a lot of Dorian talking. It'll be interesting to see what else comes of this storyline and where we're going to go. We do see Lily again, but I will talk about that when we talk about Victor and Jekyll's storyline later on. So let's get into Vanessa's storyline and Dracula's. So Vanessa goes to see Dr. Seward again, and we see Reinfeld right off the bat is looking really, really nervous and wants to know how she's doing. And of course we know that Reinfeld is already under the sway of Dracula and is required to get information about her. And wants medical history, address, things like that. So we know that Reinfeld, knows where Vanessa lives already. So we know that that's setting up that they're going to be able to follow her. If they hadn't already, they were going to know where she lives. Interesting enough, Seward starts recording all of Vanessa's conversations with her. That is something that Seward does in the book. Seward records all of Reinfeld's, when Reinfeld is a patient of Dr. Seward's in Dracula, he records all of the conversations on wax cylinders like he's doing with Vanessa. What she is doing with Vanessa. The gender change is going to throw me. Sorry, guys. So, obviously, Vanessa pours out her heart to Seward, and Seward seems very, very shaken. It'll be interesting to know if Seward truly does believe her. But, obviously, it destroys Vanessa. Vanessa seems really, really upset, and so does Dr. Seward. And I did really enjoy that line that Dr. Seward says, where she says, we'll find a way through this, but go and make yourself happy. Do something that makes you happy. And of course, what is the thing that Vanessa goes to do to make herself happy? And she goes to the museum. And she goes to see Dr. Sweet. And so Dr. Sweet is giving a talk. And there's a very interesting shot where when Vanessa goes and sits down and Dr. Seward sees her, right in that shot, right when Dr. Seward goes and leans on the railing, right there, he is got antlers right behind his head. And it's a great shot of him with stag, and it reminds me, I was a huge fan of Hannibal, and it's a great stag, almost a Wendigo kind of reference, and kind of gives you this animalistic hint to him already, even though we didn't really know what was going on with him and he seemed so sweet and kind, but automatically that gives you a hint of a symbol of animal to him that in retrospect it goes, hey, he's not exactly what he seems. There's this animalness to him. And it's something subtle that you may not have noticed when you were watching it the first time, but if you go back and watch it, it's there. Again, all of this is too convenient. He immediately starts talking about arachnids and scorpions when she shows up, even though he pretends that he doesn't remember her name. All of it's too convenient. And he's very, very sweet and very kind, and they talk about the expeditions, and it draws her in, and the fact that, he's not made for adventuring, but he really likes expeditions, and he really likes Jules Verne, and that he isn't made of the stuff of our heroes, but he follows them. And I really liked the insight that Vanessa loves Joan of Arc, which is completely fitting for her if you think about it. That Joan of Arc died for her faith, and while Vanessa hasn't been able to follow her faith completely, of course she would admire someone who is able to completely give herself up to her faith despite all the trials that she went through, because Vanessa has had to go through so many trials due to her faith and due to who she is and the visions she has and the specialness that she has, that even if her end is to die, I think Vanessa would hope that she would be saved like Joan of Arc was, as opposed to something horrible, which is exactly what the devil, Lucifer, Dracula really want for her. So it's something really interesting. It kills me that her and Dr. Sweet have such amazing chemistry. But that's the point, though, really, isn't it? Dracula is supposed to be one of those really, really just charming, amazing men that just draws you in. And he's like a spider. Vanessa always has spiders associated with her, but she's always been the spider. She's never been around someone who hasn't set off her warning bells. Even Dorian set off her warning bells, and she went towards him. This is someone who's setting the honey pot, who is the spider, and she's the fly, and that's never exactly happened before. And it's really, really interesting to see, in retrospect, watching it happen. And it's as dangerous as we know it is for Vanessa. It's hard not to love their interactions and kind of just be drawn in by it and love it. I really enjoy their interactions, and I want to see more of it. And of course, they go out on a date. And one of the other things I noticed multiple times in this episode, there's the talk of taxidermy, and there's talk of mirrors behind the eyes, which is something that they had brought up in season 1 with the way that Vanessa's particular type of taxidermy, where she would put mirrors behind the eyes of the taxidermy pieces she would do to cause, when the light would reflect into the eyes of the taxidermy animals, it would make them seem more alive and give them a more lifelike quality. And there's talk in this of animals having more lifelike quality in the taxidermy pieces. They talked about that with the tiger, and there are a couple other instances in this episode where they talk about that. And it's very, very interesting to note that. And they're hearkening back to a couple episodes back in season 1, and it's not just a coincidence. They're doing it on purpose, especially with the taxidermy. As a note, if you guys are interested in me doing a supplemental on scorpions and spiders and taxidermy, let me know. I actually am really, really big into taxidermy. I own a lot of pieces, and I know a lot about the history of it, and I also know a lot about the lore and the symbolism of scorpions and spiders, especially when it deals with ancient Egyptian lore, which comes into play with Vanessa, which I will talk about most likely in other episodes, because I'm sure will come up again. I have no problem doing a quick supplemental video on that, but that will take too much for this episode. So Vanessa and Dr. Sweet go on a date. I think it's really sweet that Vanessa asked him out by herself. Again, that shows how bold she can be and how unconventional she is. The date goes really, really well, of course. She asks Dr. Sweet out for coffee, and the reason he refuses the coffee is he's got to go meet with Dr. Reinfeld, and reveals himself to be Dracula. Dun 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 dun. It's the true temptation. And I'm glad that they immediately this episode showed who Dracula was, showed us that it is Dr. Sweet, and gave that to us right off the bat, so that while Vanessa doesn't know, we do, and so we can see him in both lights. And it'll allow us to see that duality, because that's the one thing about Dracula. He is about the duality. He is about the light and the dark. And the thing about this show is that even the darkest creatures have humanity in them. And I think that we're going to see that with Dracula. So, to talk about the Dracula book a little bit more and to get into his character, one of the things we haven't seen yet, we haven't seen Jonathan Harker, Mina's husband. He is mentioned in season 1, but he is never mentioned again, and we have not seen him. He didn't even go, as far as I know, he didn't go to Mina's funeral. He may not even know Mina's dead. In the book, Jonathan Harker was captured by Dracula and had to escape on his own. If that's what's going on here, who knows? He may show up in this season, he may not. He may not show up ever. It'll be very interesting to see if they do anything with Jonathan Harker. I think it's very clear at this point that Mina and Lucy's parts in the books have sort of switched. One of the things that's interesting to note is that Lucy is the one who turned first in the book, and Mina is the one who was truly wanted by Dracula. So obviously that's kind of switched around in the TV show. And obviously not everything's going to have a direct parallel, but it's enough similar that I think it should be noted. Also, Lucy had quite a few, one of Lucy's suitors, which I think is really interesting, is one of Lucy's suitors was an American cowboy named Quincy Morris. And we have a American cowboy in Ethan, so I think that's an interesting, they might have done that on purpose. I think that's really cute. I don't know if cute's the right word, but that's an interesting parallel. One of the other things that I think is a great little play on Dracula is that Dracula was noted that, and this is a direct quote from the book, he was in life a most wonderful man, a soldier, a statesman, and an alchemist. So while this Dr. Sweet isn't an alchemist, he is not doing chemistry or anything like that. He is a zoologist. He's doing something to do with science and things like that. So I think, and he is acting the most wonderful man. He is acting as he was stated to be in life. So it's very interesting that they're doing that duality. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do with him. I'm so excited about this. And he is, the actor they have playing him is so charming. And I'm in love with him. I'm very, very excited to see what they do with him. So on to Victor and Jekyll. So interesting again to note that Jekyll is confirmed to be half Indian. And his mother is the one who's from India, and his father was an aristocrat who got his mother pregnant. His mother died in India, and he wants justice for his father. He wants his dad basically to die so he can have justice for what happened to his mother. And for his basic existence, there is the root right there of Jekyll's anger and what will turn him into Hyde eventually. Very, very interesting take on Jekyll and Hyde. I think it fits in very, very well again with the Victorian England part of what they're going with here. And again, that duality, those two things deep in the marrow of people, I think it's a very different take of what happened in the book, but I think it's much more relatable and very different and fresh. And again, we find out that Jekyll works at Bedlam Asylum. So, history time. Bedlam Asylum, the most infamous asylum that there ever was. So infamous and so famous that the word Bedlam, it got its own word in the dictionary. I mean, it's that intense. So, to give you guys some history on Bedlam. If you guys don't know what the word Bedlam means, it means an uproar and confusion. The place was known forever as being basically like around it. It was so loud that people could hear the crazed screams of the insane and the patients just screaming all the time. That's how bad this place was. It was originally, I'm having to read off my notes, so that's what I'm staring at. So it was originally founded in 1247. By the 1600s, the place was disgusting, and the patients were often kept near starvation. So the starvation that Jekyll talks about in the show is true. That was happening in the 1600s, and it never really got better after that. I mean, they were having problems 200 years, almost 300 years before this show was on, or before the show takes place. It moved to where it is in the show in 1815, and it had a max capacity for 364 patients. And nothing was done to lift things up, regardless of the renovations. Nothing, while they expanded and they supposedly made things better, nothing got better. It was horrible. To give you an idea, state of things, and what the patients had to deal with, here's what one patient went through. And I'm going to read this directly. This is exactly what they found one person went through. A stout iron ring was riveted around his neck, from which a short chain passed to a ring made to slide upwards and downwards on a massive iron bar, more than 6 feet high, inserted into a wall. Round his body a strong iron bar about 2 inches wide was riveted. On each side of the bar was a circular projection, which, being fashioned to and enclosing each sides of his arm, pinioned them close to his sides. This waist bar was secured by 2 similar iron bars, which, passing over his shoulders, were riveted to his waist, both before and behind. The iron bar about his neck was connected to these bars on his shoulders by a double link. From each of these bars another short chain passed to the ring on the upright bar, and thus he remained encased and chained for more than 12 years. This guy sat enchained, basically in an iron straitjacket, for 12 years. That's how bad this place was. There were inquiries to make this place better. It didn't get better until about the early to late 1900s. When Jekyll says that this place drove people insane, that it took sane people and drove them insane, he wasn't kidding. They said raw sewage would get backed up, and so sewage was just running all over the floors. People would get sick and die. Like, it was horrible. So the fact that Jekyll is having to work there, even though he is more intelligent than this and he's prestigious, it is obviously he's very, very upset about it, and it's a horrible, terrible place. And it's perfect for a gothic television show to be set. And when he says, "They never see the light, they only see me," that is a perfect fitting quote. So we see Jekyll's lab. It is a very beautiful, awesome lab. The chair that he's using, the barber's chair, reminds me of Sweeney Todd. I don't know if they were using that as a kind of allusion to Sweeney Todd, but they might have been. Obviously, again, they say eyes, mirrors to the soul. Again, an allusion to the I would put mirrors behind the whole world if I could, the Vanessa line. And again, they talk about making people dormant, and that they can make Lily dormant. Lily doesn't need to be corrected. Lily doesn't need to be made dormant. Lily is fine the way she is. There's nothing wrong with Lily. Sure, Lily's angry, and sure, Lily wants to destroy people, and she may be evil and a little twisted, but she has a right to be angry. She was, number one, murdered by Victor. She was turned into this creature against her will. And she was lied to. There's a lot of stuff that Lily has a right to be angry about. And having her agency taken away, and them talking about her again like she's property, like she's a thing, and that she needs to be made dormant, and that she needs to be just almost like put in her place, and that she just needs to be corrected, is really, really disgusting to me. And again, I know that the show knows that, and I know that the show is going to take care of that in so many good ways. It's not going to work well for Jekyll, and it's not going to work well for Victor. They are both their own worst enemies at this time, and as a woman, I really, really hope that they get dealt with, because hearing men talk about a woman like that, regardless of who she is gross, because there's nothing sick about Lily. She's not mentally ill. There's nothing wrong with her. She's just different. And she's just fed up and tired of being treated like property by Victor and like a child. And so she's reacted accordingly. Maybe not in the way that you and I would, but and definitely not in the way that Victor wants her to, but just because of that doesn't mean that she needs correction. So obviously that's not going to work well. We see obviously Jekyll doesn't think it's a great idea, but I don't think it's going to work well for him. We see the drug work, and it's really, really impressive. And he uses it on a patient that apparently tried to execute the queen. I did some research on this, and I can't quite pinpoint which of the people who tried to assassinate Queen Victoria it is. There were multiple people who tried to assassinate Queen Victoria. I think there were like 8 or 9. I think it's a mix between Edward Oxford, who was actually in the hospital, actually in Bedlam, and was released early, and Roderick McLean, who was attempted to assassinate Queen Victoria in 1882 over a curt reply to a poem. He sent her a poem. She didn't like it. Sent him a curt reply, and he tried to assassinate her over it. And he also got sent to an insane asylum, but not Bedlam. So it sounds like they're a little bit of a mix of both, but just a little history tidbit for you. So obviously the drug works. The man is rendered completely sane and domicile. That's not the correct word, but you know what I mean. And basically that shows us how calm that drug can make us, make you. And obviously it kind of shows us what will happen the opposite way when we see Hyde, I am assuming. The last scene I'll talk about when it comes to Victor especially is Victor goes and visits Lily and goes and sits on a bench and looks sad and pathetic, crying, watching her dress like a sad sack. Lily is very generous and actually goes and talks to him and basically tells him that you shouldn't be here, you're not going to like who I'm becoming. I was your first love, your first girlfriend, you'll get over me. You need to get over me. You know, there's nothing here for you. And Victor's like, I need to save you. And Lily rightly says, I don't need saving, and I especially don't need saving from you. I need no man to save me. I'm fine. And I really, really appreciated Lily. She seemed very calm and treated him much more kindly than he actually deserved. And I'm sure it's not going to work. I'm sure Victor is not going to take anything she said to heart and is going to keep going with what he's going. It's going to be very interesting to see how that whole plays out. I appreciated Lily for being very calm in that entire situation. I'm sure Dorian wouldn't treat things as well. Also, again, Victor shot her repeatedly, and she's treating him very kindly. I wouldn't. And she just treats him very kindly and tells him, hey, get over it, it's fine, but don't come back. I think that's very, very sweet. And he needs to get over her. But for the sake of the show, obviously he won't. So let's go on to New Mexico. Not a lot to unpack here, but some very interesting tidbits. So we get some more pictures of dead people, the daguerreotypes that they take. And again, interesting enough, they covered it in season 1, but in case you guys don't know, sometimes the only picture you would ever have taken back then was when you were dead. Photography was still very, very, very expensive back then, and it was also very, very hard to sit still because it took a long time to take pictures. So often the only picture you would ever have taken of a loved one was when they were dead. So that's why we have a lot of pictures of dead people from back then, is because it was the only time you would ever actually have the opportunity to have a picture of a dead loved one. So those are all the pictures of the people that Ethan, all the people who were killed in the taking of Ethan. We get a sheriff involved now with the agents of the Queen, and we get a lovely scene, a dick measuring contest between the Americans and the British people trying to decide who has jurisdiction over Ethan. And they determine that they know where Ethan's going, and it's to the Talbot Range, obviously named after Ethan's family. And again, Ethan's dad seems like he has a lot of money, but we don't learn a lot about it besides that. We do learn that Hecate is listening, and she goes off to go try to find Ethan on her own. Ethan is in a small bar with the men that were paid by his dad to go, capture him. And as I suspected, it's full moon. There is a Native American woman who is working in the bar who recognizes him and says that she recognizes him and knows him from what he's done. Ethan mentions that he killed a senator's son. So, now we kind of understand what he's done. That's the first time we actually have ever heard this. And we also know that she knew, I'm going to pronounce this name wrong. I'm going to try to say Caetane's family. And he asks where the old demon is. So I assume the old demon is what turned him into a werewolf in the first place. And she says that most of the old family is dead in the ground or frozen and in the Oklahoma territories now. So I'm very curious to know if that is the old family or if there is a pack of werewolves. Again, we don't know a lot about the werewolf lore that they're going with in this show, and there's so many different kinds of werewolf lore, and the werewolf lore in The Wolfman is very different from what they're going with in this show. I have no idea. It's very, very curious, and they're giving us little tidbits here and there, so I have no idea where they're going with this. But we do know that the old demon is still alive, most likely, but it's very, very scattered in the Oklahoma territory, so we are most likely going to have to go to Oklahoma at some point. He tells her to leave because of the full moon, and they do share a very sweet moment, and I really appreciated that. And the killing starts, and Hecate's there, and she helps the werewolf kill all of the men, and at the end, while Ethan is in full feral mode, all wolfed out and everything, and she's in her full demon, witchy prettiness and her baldness and demon markness, they share a moment, and obviously she missed him, and he doesn't attack her, which I think is very interesting considering last time he didn't attack her the last time he saw her either. So there's obviously something going on there. She is really, really into this whole Wolf of God thing and really wants the Wolf of God again for the devil. So Ethan is going to be dealing with his own temptations with Hecate, and she's going to be sticking with him and helping him with this for better or worse. And our last plot line, which will tie in a little bit with Ethan, and I'll talk about that a little bit, is Malcolm and Caetane on the ship to America. So Malcolm is sending Vanessa a message saying, hey, I'm going to the Americas. That's where I've decided I'm going to head out to. I hope you're doing okay. Doesn't really tell her a lot. And obviously, what I thought was really interesting is that when Vanessa writes him back, she actually hopes that he finds Ethan. So she's still thinking about him. But they sit down and have a little talk, and Caetane mentions that Ethan basically killed all of these people, and we knew that he had killed a lot of Native Americans, and that's not a surprise considering what he did in the military and with what the Americans were doing to the Native Americans at the time. And he came to Caetane and wanted to die, and basically Caetane said he was crueler to let him suffer, and he wanted him to suffer with him. And there, Sir Malcolm and Caetane have this bonding moment over wanting these people to suffer with him, because obviously he had wanted Vanessa to suffer with him for everything that he had perceived Vanessa had done to him. But obviously he mentions that he had gotten over what happened with Vanessa, and that he loves her. It's a kind of love, which I think is very strange, because he has made it very, very clear at the end of last season that he loved her like a daughter, but it wasn't of a kind. I had been under the impression that he loved her very, very deeply and truly like a daughter. It wasn't just of a kind, oh, I've gotten over my hatred of you, I kind of love you as a daughter. It was more, you might as well be my true daughter kind of thing. So that statement kind of threw me for a loop, but he may be trying to be as enigmatic as this man is trying to be. I will apologize, I don't know enough about Apache culture and Native American culture as I would like to. I'm going to be doing a lot more research on it, especially as we get deeper on into the culture, so that I can talk a lot more about it, because I don't want to get anything wrong on that, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting going forward. So I'm not going to talk about that too much in this episode, especially we see Ketene do that, whatever he does that causes him to get inside Ethan's dream. I don't know how he does it, but it happens, and it's cool, and obviously he confronts Ethan. And interesting enough, Ethan is really not happy to see him. I was expecting Ethan to be happy. Ethan is not. Ethan basically tells him that if he sees him in person, he's going to kill him, and that he has blood on his teeth and blood on his soul, and that he's going to kill his real father, and then he's going to kill Ketene. Why? We don't know. Obviously, we're going to find out. Maybe it's that whole, love-hate relationship that Vanessa and Sir Malcolm had at the end of in season 1 that we had going on, where, she was so upset with him and needed him. It's kind of the same situation going on with Ketene and Ethan. So it'll be very curious to see if that's what's going on there. I thought it was a very, very well done scene. And again, he says that Ethan is Apache or he's nothing. That that's all he is at this point. That he's not anything else. And again, it'll be very curious to see what that all means. We don't know much about Ethan's story. And we really haven't delved much into it in these 2 episodes. Still, at this point, there's still so much more that we need to learn about it. And I'm really hoping that we cover more of it, and it looks like we're going to cover more of it in next episode. So that's it for episode 2. I hope you guys enjoyed it. There wasn't as much to unpack book-wise in this episode. I think next episode, it seems like we're going to be covering more in the New Mexico territory. So I'm going to cover a little bit more about the Old West, and cover a little bit more about that lore. So I'm going to be doing a lot more research on that for you guys. And hopefully we can delve more into Dorian's story and more into Dracula. I love Dracula, so I could talk about that all day. And hopefully John Clare will be coming back from Antarctica, because that's a long hike, and we haven't seen him. So, again, this is Lindsay with When Nerds Attack, and this has been Dreadfully Yours.